So the question, how does the superheroine Birthstone achieve her growth without dying? Research. The square cube law dictates that there is a ceiling on how large a human can grow before dying from circulatory failure, collapsing under their own weight, overheating, failure of body chemistry at that scale, or the simple trauma of sudden changes to the body. While Hush is a known exome with a non-human circulatory system, advanced cellular respiration, normal size cell, and extraordinary resistance to overheating, she is even larger than Birthstone. All of which, while a fascinating phenomenon to observe, DNA samples of any kind from Hush have proven unfeasible to obtain at this time. Blood samples from Birthstone have been obtained. Per Seven Cities law, any blood that is shed from the body is considered public property and free to obtain by anyone. These samples from Birthstone have shown that the individual red blood cells contained within have 1,728 times the mass of a typical human red blood cell, each of which has a diameter of 84 micrometers and a thickness of 30 micrometers. Typical human red blood cells are 7 micrometers and 2.5 micrometers thick, fitting well within the hypothesis that Birthstone cells are also 12 times the size of a normal human blood cell. Trace amounts of delta radiation have also been found within both red and white blood cells, approximately 1/3 of a count per second. Not enough to induce any mutation in staph, but still enough to note. No radioactive particles have been discovered in the blood, and no radiation exists within the plasma nor the platelets. It's actually lower in radiation value than the background radiation of the lab. It is noted to be unusual to find delta radiation in Birthstone's blood, since delta radiation doesn't occur naturally. We'll continue to observe. Delta radiation is an artificially created radiation believed to have been first created in 2648 AUC. Even in low doses, delta radiation has proven to induce controlled mutation, changes to states of matter without change in temperature, interference with the fundamental forces of the universe, and conversion of matter and energy with negative loss. Hence the Greek letter delta, representing change, and the fact it comes after gamma. Despite its myriad of uses for the Mad Scientist Union, MSU, delta radiation has proven to be unpredictable, proceeding with caution. Hypothesis. The Yoten cells, Birthstone, possess 1,728 times the size of a normal human cell, but are able to function with far greater efficiency. It may be due to the delta radiation in her system. Duplicating her cells should be able to duplicate the result. Initial test experiment. Replicating the Yotun's blood. Taking DNA samples from white blood cells have allowed the creation of stem cells from Birthstone's DNA, which is both normal size and has no known genetic abnormalities, but there is 144 times as much DNA in the nucleus as in a typical human white blood cell, creating marrow cells to then produce blood cells, liver cells to also synthesize from Birthstone stem cells to produce blood plasma. The synthetic blood has proven to be identical to the original samples and are approved for the next stage of experimentation. Blood and synthetic replicant is to be deemed Yoten blood in documentation. New research data. The blood has proven to be O-negative blood type and carries no disease. Blood type of volunteers should be irrelevant. Secondary experiment. A double-blind study. Neither the doctors nor the subjects know what they are receiving. Inject half a pint of Yoten blood into 10 subjects, and in the other half of the 10 subjects, half a pint of mundane O-negative blood. Observations are to occur for 24 hours to observe for any ill effects. Results. In less than 5 minutes, all subjects who were injected with Yoten blood were deceased. Autopsy revealed the cause of death to be numerous blood clots caused by enlarged blood cells, which could not fit through the capillaries, and larger platelets leading to clotting in the main arteries. Control group was understandably upset. Conclusion: don't do that again. More specifically, introducing Yoten blood directly into a typicam's circulatory system results in fatal blood clots. The difference in scale between the cells is massive. It is like asking for a 2-lane highway to accommodate almost 4,000 cars side to side and bumper to bumper. We may need to go even smaller than the blood. The liver cells are larger than human liver cells, but despite the extra DNA in the Yoten's nuclei, the DNA is the same size, and the pairs are all still the same. And just because no known genetic defects have been found doesn't mean that the answer isn't in her DNA. There's over 3 billion nucleotides and almost 6 feet to go through it all. I recommend either attempts through horizontal gene transfer or full cloning of the subject. Refined experiment will be split into 2 separate experiments. Question: what causes the Yoten to be so large without harm to the self? Research: we cannot directly inject the Yoten's blood into a human circulatory system. It causes fatal blood clots. Examination of the DNA reveals normal-sized DNA. As far as we can tell, the DNA is normal human, with the exception of a single gene difference coined GT gene by the founding scientist, so named after the 2-letter pair that both starts and ends the gene sequence. Removing this gene with CRISPR and placing it within a normal human cell successfully causes the cell to grow 16 times the normal size by the 4th generation. Further small-scale tests reveals that this is successful with skin cells, muscle cells, bone cells, adolescent blood cells, and even brain cells. Further testing is advised. A sister experiment, Project Rhea, has also been approved. A project proving the cloning of the Yoten within 5 volunteer surrogates. Half a dozen cloned fertilized eggs are to be placed within the surrogates to allow for failure of some or all of the eggs. Observation is to continue throughout the pregnancy. Experiment for the Yoten serum experiment. Horizontal gene transfer has proven successful to various cells. So now there are 5 subjects who will be introduced to a serum with a harmless virus attached to the GT gene that is expected to spread across the body within hours. The virus is not contagious, but the subjects will remain quarantined along with 5 of the control group for observations. Observation is to occur across a 4-month-long period. Day 1. Subjects exposed to serum reported increased hunger. Control group had a slight increase in appetite, but this is expected by the halo effect. Day 2. Hunger remains escalated amongst the experimental group. Double-blind has officially failed. Control group is kept with experimental group to see if it changes the results. Day 10. Growth has been observed amongst the experimental group. The shortest subject started at approximately 5 feet 0 inches tall, but by day 10 they were 5 feet 9 inches, and they gained approximately 70 pounds, becoming 170 pounds. Clothing replacements have been a common request for these subjects. While our tallest subject at 6'2" at the start of the experiment only gained a single inch of height, and they only gained 10 pounds from 200 pounds. Present hypothesis is that the Yoten serum spread quicker through smaller biomass. Day 21. Behavior changes are minimal, but they are occurring. All of the experimental subjects now complain of constant muscle and bone pain. It is theorized that the pain is similar to that of growth during puberty. The growth of the Yoten serum is leaving them in pain. What is interesting to note is less about the fact they are in pain, but rather they are in such minimal pain. The subjects remark that the pain is either a 5 or 6 on the pain scale, distracting or distressing. But considering the fact that every internal organ is changing, bones should be breaking and reforming, new neural pathways should be forming, and essentially nothing should be the same of the internal structures. Even so, the experimental subjects spend the majority of their time eating or sleeping, with maybe 2 active hours a day. It should be noted at this point that subjects are consuming an average of 18,400 kilocalories per day, over 8 times the amount of the average typicam adult human. Nutritional supplement has proven effective, but future experiments should note that nutritional needs of subjects will far exceed that of even exome humans. Malnutrition is expected to be fatal within 2 days of subjects with food withdrawn. The control subjects are expressing discomfort. Even the most soft-spoken experimental subjects now intimidate food out of the control subjects, with even the smallest experimental subjects now over 8 feet tall and weighing over 600 pounds. The control subjects now give their food to the experimental subjects. Additional food has been provided to the control subjects, and requests for more food have been replaced with the chapter president. The expected final size of the experimental subjects is 60 to 80 feet. With the calorie consumption at this rate, it is expected that a single experimental subject will consume 9,420,880 kilocalories a day just to maintain their metabolism. That's enough to feed over 20,000 adult humans. And we have 5 such subjects to feed. Requesting further aid from the chapter president. Day 30. All experimental subjects are now 10 feet tall with a variation of approximately half an inch. Body weights vary wildly from 800 pounds to 851 pounds. So far, it is all following the square cube law. Calorie consumption is nearly 20,000 per subject. They continue to grow, and intimidation has become full-on aggression. Our first reports of violence have been recorded. The experimental subjects have seized the mattresses and blankets from the control group. The chapter president has ordered that we continue the isolation until the end of the 4th month. Day 74. Experimental subjects are now over 20 feet tall, possibly over 30 feet tall. We cannot tell for sure since we don't go into the testing chamber anymore. But we estimate their weight to be between 3,355 pounds and between 6,400 pounds. Ironically enough, the subject that was previously the heaviest and the tallest at the beginning of the experiment is now one of the lightest. And the shortest subject at the beginning is now the heaviest and the apparent leader of the experimental subjects. This is confusing at first until we consider the relay theory. The Yotunn serum is bound to make them all 80 feet tall at exactly the same time, the 120th day. It's like a race where everyone has a different starting line, but are all bound by fate to arrive at the finish line at the same time. The ones closest to the finish line are going to move the slowest, since they are the closest and have the least amount of distance to cover at the same time, while the ones furthest from the finish line move the quickest to reach that finish line. That negligible difference is now visible with thousands of pounds of difference in muscle and bone. The control subjects are now completely ignored, except when the experimental subjects are attacking them. The experimental subjects are almost careful with the control groups, often knocking them down, picking them up, dropping them, or holding them down. The experimental subjects only attack aggressively when it comes to food. The experimental subjects are now consuming 561,563 calories per day. The chapter president has provided us with a hyper-dense, nutrient-rich paste for the subjects. They look like tubes of toothpaste, but apparently they contain over 20,000 calories in a single gram of the goo. The texture is very much like toothpaste, but it tastes like congealed grease to me. Very nasty, but the experimental subjects go feral for it. They even attack each other, often punching, kicking, throwing, scratching, and even bruise or break each other over these items. Not that bruises or black eyes mean much when they now heal within minutes. Even fractured bones heal within mere hours. This is bad for us when one experimental subject threw the other subject at the observational glass. The same glass designed to hold back the ocean and subs made to go to the bottom of the ocean, and the glass cracked. The subjects didn't seem to notice, and the subject that was thrown against the glass only laughed it off, not even bruised from that fight. And the subjects are still growing. They each go through about a tube of the nutritional paste every 4 days, and we're hoping it'll help sustain the control subjects also. All they can get is a few grams every few days at this point. Still a lot of calories, but hunger is hunger, and the giants aren't sharing. Day 80. We have a new problem. The testing space, while being over 100 feet tall, is only 3,000 square feet wide. For 10 normal-sized people, it's a perfectly respectable amount of space. For most of the volunteers, it was the largest place they ever stayed in their lives. But now, the experimental subjects are rapidly approaching 60 feet at height. At this point, the space of them is barely 250 square feet that they're sharing with 4 other roommates. And 5 pests. They're cooped up in too small a space that's getting smaller with the others, and they're all competing. The competition for what little entertainment there is quite high, with the books being too small to read, the computers long since smashed, and the only jukebox difficult to operate for them. Fighting and sparring are the most common form of entertainment, excepting other entertainment. I don't think that they care anymore that we're here, but the cracks in the test space are getting worse. Day 90. The experimental subjects are now officially 60 feet or even taller, matching or exceeding the height of the original Yoten Birthstone and soon to match the silent giant Hush by day 120. They are now consuming almost 4 million calories a day, enough to feed 2,000 people. They're now all consuming a tube of the nutrient paste per each day. I'm scared to do the calculations for their weight, but every time one steps, the floor creaks, and the support beams for that room were all made to hold over 100,000 pounds per square inch. Something I'm noticing more with the experimental subjects is they now seem less bothered by pain. At first I thought that meant that they were in less pain, but now I realize from how much more that they're fighting with each other, that they're feeling the pain just as much, but they're taking it out on each other. And they're getting more and more claustrophobic with each other. We even had an experimental subject have a panic attack. She grabbed at her chest, staring at us through the monitoring glass. That look in her eyes, I don't feel comfortable, even with 10 feet of shatterproof glass between us. Day 100. Something I just wondered when we got another shipment of the nutrient paste. Where is it all coming from? Sure, it saves space, but still, these are a lot of calories to fit in such a dense gel. We're certainly not feeding them uranium, so what on earth can possibly be so calorie dense? The giants continue to grow and now completely ignore the control group regardless. The control group now at this point is just trying not to be killed by the experimental group by accident. Only 20 more days to go. Day 120. The giants' heights have now stabilized. They are now all 60 feet tall, and none of them were happy, but they finally addressed us for the first time since the beginning of the experiment. They asked us how they were supposed to leave, and I don't have an answer for them. I thought that the chapter president would have given us direction on what to do. The only news I received from him is that there is no more nutrient paste being sent. Each giant is now successfully consuming 9,420,800 calories a day, equivalent to the caloric intake for 20,000 adult humans each day, or only 3 tubes of the nutrient paste each. Still though, our last crate went in today, and I don't know how they expect us to feed them. We have about 500 staff at this facility, and enough food to last us a couple of days, but that still isn't even enough to feed one of these giants, let alone all 5. I hope the chapter president responds soon. Day 121. The giants have escaped. They got hungry, and without food they started suffering the symptoms of malnutrition way too quickly. Excessive salivating, headaches, irritability. It started when they tried to intimidate the control group for food, but they haven't interacted in over a month. The giants, they forgot how fragile humans are. Just picked up one control subject, and the giant just snapped the poor man almost in half. 4 months ago, they were best friends, just interns trying to pay for college. They thought it would be cool to earn some money. I suggested this experiment to them. Be a lab rat for a few months, get some college credits and just enough money to pay off college, and then they got separated from the experiment. But I still thought, a part of me hoped that there had to be a cure for the Yoten serum, a way back for them to be friends with each other, to be friends with me again. The Jotunn held the broken control subject in his hand, and then his eyes went wide while he tore into the control subject. Licking off his poor friend's blood from his fingers, he bellowed to the rest of his pack. "They taste like nutrient paste." It all fell into place then. Just how the MSU was able to pay for something so calorie dense. How they were able to supply us so easily. The Birthstone cells. They could produce organs, marrow, liver, fat, and protein. All on the same scale as these giants. And they were training the giants to eat human flesh. Giving them nothing else to eat for almost 3 months. And then starving them after merely 1 day. Leaving them claustrophobic, leaving them afraid, leaving them in pain, and just leaving them with no way out, leaving them like cornered animals. And then I remembered what Yotunn meant. It didn't merely mean giant. Another translation of the word is man-eater. The other control subjects didn't even last a minute before they were all caught, and the giants exhausted their new food source. I couldn't help myself, but I did some new math in my head. Humans possess almost 81,000 calories in their entire body. Sometimes a little more, but sometimes a little less. But still, needing over 9.5 million calories? That was barely a lick. They would need to eat 116 people each just to meet their basic requirements. Once I realized that, I went to my office at a brisk but calm pace, careful not to alert anyone else of what was going to happen. It took less than an hour for them to escape, breaking through reinforced glass, steel, and concrete like it was all made of cardboard. 500 staff on site and 499 of them were eaten, and the giants were all still starving. Eventually, they found their way out, so I took the time to write this out to send to the chapter president. If you can see this message, you need to stop them. They are hungry, they have taste for human flesh, and they are desperate. And an important detail I didn't mention in my reports before, because there was no point in mentioning it, not when I thought there was a way to fix everything, but with those 5 giants loose out in the world, you should know, the entire MSU should know, 3 of those giants are pregnant. Results from Project Rhea. Month 1. Each of the 5 surrogates are successfully impregnated. 1 surrogate has twins and 1 has triplets. Calorie consumption is nearly 6,000 calories each, but this is considered normal based on what was learned from the Yoten serum experiment. Month 2. All surrogates are now placed in a medically induced coma for the safety of the surrogates. All surrogates volunteered to be placed in a coma. Month 4. Round-the-clock intensive care is provided for surrogates. Patients are all on 4 separate IV drips each to meet caloric and hydration demand of the pregnancies. Caloric demand is expected to increase. Yoten from sister experiment have escaped at this time. Month 5. Delta radiation treatment has been approved to keep both surrogates and fetuses alive. All have been approved by the chapter president. Surrogates are to be kept comatose until such time it is deemed safe for them to be awake. Month 8. Caesarean section is approved for all the surrogates, both to save them and the infants. All 8 of the infants were successfully saved. Newborns' weights are identical at 5,184 pounds and a length of 216 inches or 18 feet. Infants are all considered extremely underweight and will need intensive care. One surrogate passed away due to failure of anesthetic. Delta radiation repair of the surviving 4 surrogates have been approved. Mandatory 18 months of therapy and psych evaluation for all involved has been approved. Analysis of data. It is possible to replicate the original Yotunn's ability of growth to normal humans. Weaponization of new Yotunn is viable. High-calorie food is to be a priority before more are to be made. Cloned Yotunn are too high a risk for surrogates, and the subjects will take too long to weaponize effectively. Cloned Yotunn are to be raised by the MSU. Report conclusions. Present model from the Yotunn serum is considered too slow. Test subjects are to be fed on IV drip and kept in a comatose state before initial injection of Yotunn serum. Subjects are then to be given weekly doses of high-density delta radiation to force the cells to replicate sooner and accelerate the 4-month period to a single month before awakening and beginning training on weaponization. Replication of experiment. Replication of Birthstone stem cells, blood, and serum are to be approved by the MSU. The MSU is expected to produce 50 viable Yotunn soldiers before the month is out to capture the 8 escaped giants that were created from initial testing. Thank you so much for listening, and as some of you remember from the Coastal Guardian story, there was a scientist that took some of Birthstone's blood and kept it in a vial marked Yoten. So that's where that blood went, and this is what they did with it. Once again, be careful with what you have, because you never know what people are going to do with it. But yeah, let's see if the MSU or possibly someone else is able to deal with so many starving giants out there. Thank you for listening, and you have a good rest of your night.